I'm Amy, and I've always lived for the spotlight. My beauty, my image, the way the world sees me. It's all I've ever known. It's what gets me ahead in life. Or at least, it's what I tell myself. I grew up in a world where the perfect look could open doors, and I learned early that if you want to be someone, you have to look the part. Nothing else mattered as much. Tonight was supposed to be my big break, my moment. I had spent hours getting ready, picking the perfect dress, the right makeup, all to ensure I stood out in the crowd at this high-profile gala. And there I was, surrounded by fashion icons, photographers, and models, each one more dazzling than the last. I could feel the eyes on me, and for once, it felt like the attention was exactly where it belonged. But of course, that moment, the one I'd been working towards, it didn't come without a hitch. No, it came with a disaster, a moment that would change everything. I was standing there, feeling like the queen of the room, when the waiter, this idiot, bumped into me, spilling an entire drink all over my dress. My perfect dress, the one I spent hours picking out. The stain spread across my gown like a giant red flag. My night was ruined. My shot at impressing James Grant, the most important photographer in the fashion world, evaporated in seconds. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry," the waiter stammered. But his apology wasn't enough to calm me. It wasn't even close. "Sorry's not going to fix my dress." "You spaz!" I yelled, my voice sharp with frustration. "You need to watch where you're going. If my dress is ruined, I'm going to sue you and this club. You better find a good lawyer." I could feel the eyes of the room on me, whispering behind their hands. It wasn't just the drink that had ruined my night. It was everything. I had planned this night meticulously, down to the last detail. I was supposed to meet James Grant. I was supposed to impress him, to get a shot at working with him. And now I was just the girl with the ruined dress. I felt like a joke, the punchline to a story no one would want to hear. "Amy, are you okay?" my friend asked, her voice laced with concern. But I couldn't even look at her. All I could focus on was the mess, the wrecked opportunity. "Do I look like I'm okay?" I snapped, barely holding it together. Just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Amy pointed across the room. "Isn't that James Grant?" That's who I was going to talk to until this guy ruined it. I felt my heart skip a beat. James Grant, the photographer who had the power to make or break a model's career. The man whose photos graced the pages of every major magazine. If I could just get a chance to speak to him, to show him who I really was, maybe my dreams wouldn't be so far out of reach. But now, it seemed like that was never going to happen. I didn't know what to do. Everything was falling apart. But then, a voice broke through the chaos. "Let me help you," a man said, his voice calm and reassuring. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo like everyone else. He was dressed casually, but his kindness was something I couldn't ignore. "Thank you," I said, trying to hold back the tears. "Your jacket? Please, I need to cover this stain." He didn't hesitate. Without a word, he handed me his jacket. It was a small act, but it felt like a lifeline. For a moment, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, things were going to be okay. Maybe this wasn't the end of everything. "You didn't have to do that," I said, my voice softening. "Don't mention it," he replied, smiling in that calm, unaffected way. "You've worked too hard to deal with this kind of stuff." He walked away, leaving me standing there in his jacket, trying to hold on to some semblance of dignity. I still felt the weight of the ruined night pressing down on me, but his kindness gave me a sliver of hope. I wasn't going to let this setback define me. Not tonight. After a moment, I saw James Grant again, across the room. He was talking to a group of models, laughing with them, completely oblivious to my existence. My heart sank. This was it. My last shot. If I didn't do something now, I'd never get another chance. "Hello, I'm over here," I called out, my voice a little too loud, a little too desperate. But James barely glanced in my direction. He was too busy with the models. I felt my frustration grow, but I didn't let it show. "Are you laughing at me?" I asked, unable to hide the disbelief in my voice. "No, never," James said dismissively, barely sparing me a second glance. "Okay, so you won't be on Vogue's Most Beautiful Women of the Year list?" Amy asked, a hint of sarcasm in her voice. "No, that's impossible," I snapped, trying to hold on to some shred of pride. "Look at me. I'm a perfect 10 even on a bad day." I couldn't help it. The words tumbled out of my mouth in a rush, but the reality was setting in. I was just another girl in the crowd. Nothing special. Nothing unique. Not enough to catch the eye of someone like James Grant. "I'm going after him," I said suddenly, a spark of defiance in my voice. "No, Amy, wait," Amy warned. "Think about this. You'll look crazy if you follow him." But I couldn't think straight. This was my chance. If I didn't take it, I might never get another shot. I had to act now. "You don't get it, Amy," I said, determination in my voice. "This is everything. I can't let this go." And with that, I started walking after James, ignoring Amy's protests. I wasn't going to let this chance slip away, no matter what. I continued walking toward James Grant, my heart racing in my chest. The click of my heels echoed in the silent space around me, as if the world had slowed down. I felt like every eye in the room was on me, judging me, waiting for me to fail. But I couldn't stop. Not now. This was my moment, and I wasn't going to let anything get in my way. As I approached him, I could see him talking to a group of models, laughing, totally unaware of my presence. I hesitated for just a second, wondering if I should turn around. But then I remembered all the effort I had put into getting here, the countless hours spent getting ready, the sacrifices I had made to get noticed. I had come too far to stop now. I cleared my throat, stepping into their conversation. "James Grant, right?" I said, trying to sound confident, even though I felt like my legs might give way beneath me. He turned to look at me, his expression mildly curious. "Yes?" His voice was smooth, indifferent. It didn't give anything away. He wasn't impressed. That stung more than I cared to admit. "I'm Amy," I continued, forcing a smile onto my face. "You might have seen my shampoo commercial. It was a national ad, and Style said I was the fresh face to watch for 2025. His eyes flickered for a brief moment, but his smile didn't change. "I've heard of you," he said. "That's nice." The way he said, "That's nice," made my stomach turn. It wasn't excitement or admiration. It was just a polite response. That was all. I had hoped for something more, something that would show him I was different, something to make him see me as a worthy subject for his camera. But I could already tell that wasn't going to happen. He wasn't interested. I tried to push forward, ignoring the sting in my chest. "Listen, I've worked with a lot of great photographers, but everyone says you're the best. Don't you think it's about time we work together?" James's gaze shifted toward me, and for a moment I thought he might actually consider it. But then he just shrugged, his eyes sliding back to the group of models. "I'm not sure I'm the right person for that." I stood there, stunned. The weight of his indifference hit me harder than I ever imagined. I had spent so much time building up the idea of him, putting him on a pedestal, thinking that if I could just get him to notice me, everything would fall into place. But now, standing in front of him, I realized how hollow that ambition was. "James, I'm sorry," I said, the words slipping out of my mouth before I could stop them. "But you don't understand. I'm not just some random girl. I'm perfect for you. I'm a perfect 10. I can be the one you need." But my words fell flat. He didn't even look at me when I said them. He just dismissed me, like I was some inconsequential part of the background. It was crushing. The person I had spent so long chasing, the one I thought would make everything fall into place, wasn't even interested. I could feel my hands trembling at my sides. My world had come crashing down in just a few seconds, and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. "Are you laughing at me?" I asked, my voice laced with disbelief. The question tumbled out before I could stop it, and I could see the models shifting uncomfortably, but James didn't respond. He didn't even look at me. I walked away, my head spinning with humiliation. What was the point? What was the point of trying so hard, of dressing up, of doing everything right, if it didn't matter? If nothing was enough? "You're just going to walk away," I heard Amy say behind me, her voice tinged with frustration. "You can't just let him get away with this." I stopped and turned around, facing her. "What do you want me to do, Amy? He doesn't care. He doesn't see me. And I don't know how to make him." "Look, I get it. But you're not going to change anything by walking away. You have to stand your ground. You've worked hard to get here. Don't let one guy ruin it for you." I shook my head, wiping a stray tear from my cheek. "I can't do this. I'm not cut out for this world." "Don't say that. You're Amy, right? The girl with the shampoo commercial? The girl everyone's talking about? You're meant for more than this." Her words lingered in the air, but they didn't bring the comfort I needed. They felt like empty promises, like things people said when they didn't know what else to say. But as I stood there, I realized something. I had spent so much time focusing on James, on his validation, on the idea that his attention would be the key to my success. But what if I was wrong? What if my worth didn't depend on him, or anyone else for that matter? I took a deep breath and turned around, walking out of the room. As I made my way down the hall, I could feel the sting of the rejection still fresh in my mind, but something else was beginning to take root. Maybe this was my chance to stop relying on others for approval. Maybe it was time to start believing in myself. As I walked down the hallway, the sound of my heels clicking against the polished floor seemed deafening in the silence. I couldn't shake off the sting of rejection. James Grant's indifference had pierced me more deeply than I cared to admit. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something crucial. I had spent so much time chasing after a dream that wasn't really mine. I had been so focused on trying to fit into a world that didn't even care to notice me. Why was I doing this? Why was I throwing everything away for the approval of someone I didn't even know? The more I asked myself these questions, the more I realized that I wasn't really chasing success. I was chasing validation, and it was time to let go. I pushed open the door to the club and stepped out into the cool night air. The city lights flickered in the distance, but they felt distant to me now. I felt disconnected from the world, as if the whole night had been a blur. The crowds, the flashing lights, the music. It all felt like a haze that I couldn't quite touch. I needed something real, something raw, something that would make me feel like I was worth something, not because someone told me I was, but because I knew it, deep down. I needed to find myself again. I wandered through the streets, my thoughts spiraling. I found myself outside a small, dimly lit diner, its neon sign flickering weakly. I hesitated for a moment before pushing the door open and stepping inside. The diner was nearly empty, with only a couple of people sitting in booths, lost in their own worlds. I slid into a booth near the back and ordered a coffee, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. I needed to find a way out of this cycle of self-doubt and need for validation. But I didn't know where to start. I leaned back against the booth, staring out the window. The city felt so alive, yet I felt so small in it. I had always dreamed of being something more. I had worked so hard to get here, to make a name for myself, but at what cost? I was so tired of trying to be what others wanted me to be. I wanted to be myself, for once. I wanted to stop pretending that everything was okay, when it wasn't. Suddenly, the door swung open, and in walked a man. He was tall, with dark hair and a sharp jawline. He had a certain quiet confidence about him, and he immediately caught my attention. He made his way to the counter, ordering a coffee before sitting at a nearby table. I didn't know why, but I felt compelled to speak to him. Maybe it was the loneliness that had settled in my chest, or maybe it was the way he seemed so grounded, so sure of himself. But whatever it was, I knew I had to talk to him. I took a deep breath and walked over to his table, my heart pounding in my chest. "Mind if I sit here?" I asked, my voice trembling just slightly. He looked up at me, surprised for a moment before giving me a small nod. "Sure, go ahead." I slid into the chair across from him, my hands fidgeting nervously in my lap. We sat in silence for a moment before I spoke again. "You ever feel like you're just going through the motions? Like you're chasing something that isn't even real?" He looked at me, his dark eyes studying me for a moment. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think everyone feels that way sometimes. It's easy to get lost in all the noise, in all the expectations. But that's when you've got to stop and take a step back. You've got to ask yourself what you really want." I felt something shift in me, like a light had been switched on in a dark room. This stranger, who I had just met, seemed to understand exactly what I was feeling. "I don't even know anymore," I confessed. "I've been so focused on other people's approval that I've forgotten who I am, and I don't know how to fix that." He smiled softly, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "It's not easy. But the first step is realizing that you don't need anyone's approval but your own. You don't need to be someone you're not just to fit in. You're already enough." His words hit me like a wave. I had spent so much of my life trying to be something I wasn't, trying to please everyone around me. But in the process, I had lost myself. I took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. Maybe it was time to stop chasing after the wrong things, to start living for myself instead of for others. I didn't know how to start, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could figure it out. I looked up at him, meeting his gaze. "Thank you. I think I needed to hear that." He gave me a small, genuine smile. "Any time." We sat there for a while longer, talking about life, about dreams, about the messiness of it all. There was something comforting about his presence, something calming that made me feel like maybe everything would be okay. When I left the diner that night, I felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I didn't have all the answers, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was heading in the right direction. I still didn't know what my future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to spend another moment pretending to be someone I wasn't. I was going to find my own path, and this time I would do it on my terms. As I stepped back into the night, the city felt different. It felt like it was mine, and for the first time in forever, I wasn't scared. I was ready to take control of my own story. I would write my own chapter from here on out, and no one, not even James Grant, could take that away from me. As I walked through the city streets, the weight of my decisions settled on my shoulders, but it was a different kind of weight this time. It wasn't the crushing pressure of others' expectations or the anxiety of trying to fit into a mold that didn't suit me. No, this time it was the weight of relief, a sense of freedom. I had let go of the need to please others, to be someone I wasn't. I was finally embracing who I truly was. I had taken the night to reflect, to allow myself the space to understand the words the stranger had spoken to me in the diner. You don't need anyone's approval, but your own. Those words echoed in my mind as I walked, with each step becoming more certain of what I wanted for myself. I wasn't a perfect person. I had flaws, imperfections, and I had made my share of mistakes. But now, I knew those mistakes didn't define me. What mattered was how I moved forward, and for the first time in a long time, I was ready to step into the future, with my head held high. When I got home, I checked my phone, expecting to see a few missed messages, but instead, there was an email from the modeling agency I had worked with in the past. They were looking for fresh faces for a new campaign. I stared at the email for a few moments, unsure of how to respond. I had thought about it before, whether or not I wanted to continue down that path. But now, I knew. I didn't want to chase a dream that wasn't mine anymore. I wasn't going to let the pressure of society or the fashion industry push me into something I didn't believe in. I wasn't going to let my worth be determined by a photo shoot or a magazine cover. I smiled and deleted the email. The phone buzzed again. It was a message from my friend Jasmine, the girl I had met earlier that night. Are you okay? You seemed different when you left the diner. You seemed free? I paused for a moment, thinking about what to say. There was so much I could tell her, but I decided to keep it simple, something real. I think I finally understand what it means to be myself, and it feels good. I hit send and put the phone down, staring out the window at the city below. It was late, but the streets were still alive, bustling with energy. I was no longer afraid of the noise. I didn't need the validation of others to feel whole. I had found peace within myself. The next morning, I woke up to a message that took me by surprise. It was from James Grant. My heart skipped a beat as I read the message. I think we got off on the wrong foot last night. I'd like to work with you on a shoot if you're still interested. I see something real in you. Let's talk. I sat there, staring at the screen. Part of me wanted to jump at the opportunity, but another part of me held back. It wasn't the first time someone had noticed my potential, but this time, I wasn't going to make decisions out of desperation. I wasn't going to let his approval be the thing that validated me. Instead, I took a deep breath, set the phone down, and walked over to my window. The world was out there, waiting for me. I didn't need anyone else to tell me who I was. I didn't respond to the message right away. Instead, I allowed myself the time to think, to understand what I truly wanted. And when I did respond, it wasn't with the desperation to prove myself. It was with clarity, with confidence. Thank you for reaching out. I've decided to take some time for myself and explore different opportunities that align with my own vision. Maybe our paths will cross again someday. I sent the message and felt a sense of finality, a sense of peace. The world was still there, full of possibilities, but I was no longer chasing after someone else's dream. I was going to make my own, and for the first time, I was doing it for me. In the end, I didn't need the validation from the fashion world or anyone else. What mattered was the journey I was on, learning to be true to myself. I had learned that success wasn't measured by a magazine cover or the approval of others. It was about finding inner peace, self-worth, and happiness. I had started this journey looking for validation from the outside, but now I understood that the only validation I needed was the one I gave myself. And that was enough. If you were the main character in this story, what would you do when given an opportunity you've always dreamed of? but it doesn't feel entirely right for who you are? This is a very interesting and challenging question, because if I were the main character in this story, I think I would face a major inner conflict. When receiving an opportunity I've always dreamed of, the first thing I think I would feel is happiness and pride, because I've achieved something that once seemed out of reach. However, if I felt like I wasn't entirely suited for it, I might start asking myself, is this really the path meant for me? Am I following other people's expectations instead of my own? If I felt this way, I might pause for a moment to think it over and ask myself some important questions like, what truly makes me happy? Can I find a way to grow and evolve in this opportunity without losing myself? Part of me would want to challenge myself to see how I can overcome the discomfort and grow. But another part of me would need to be honest with myself, reassessing whether this opportunity is the right one if it pushes me out of the comfort zone I've built, or whether it's just a facade of glamour that doesn't truly align with my values and goals. So, what about you? If you were in the main character's situation, what would you do when you're given a huge opportunity, but it doesn't feel completely right for who you are?